Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. Another lengthy story I have for you today concerns Ted, who for 12 years in a row received massages of both his wallet and heart, in addition to his legs. This is the perfect video for you if you've ever wondered what it's like to marry someone you met in a Thai massage parlor. Come with me on this crazy journey. Ted began attending to this massage parlor in Bangkok after experiencing some leg issues. Tac and he met there. Things didn't remain professional for long, even though she did a fantastic job and he kept returning. He was requesting a date with Tac before he even realized it. Their relationship quickly went from 0 to 100. It goes like this: you're getting a massage 1 minute, and then you're in love. But keep in mind that most of the time, when something looks too good to be true, it is. That was going to be a hard lesson for Ted. His Thai massage experience was about to become a headache that would last for 10 years, let's say. Okay, so Ted was really smitten with Tac, but in Thailand, love isn't always as easy as it looks. He picked it up fast. He soon discovered that when you're going serious with someone in Thai culture, there are certain financial expectations. The clothing came first. Tac needed new clothes, and our guy was more than willing to pay for it. Tac has a wardrobe full of new clothes after spending 30,000 baht. Let's say that's around $900. Ted wanted to make her happy, so it wasn't a modest sum. However, that was only the beginning. The dowry was the next major thing. In Thailand, it is customary for the guy to give the woman's family a dowry. It's regarded as a respectful gesture that demonstrates your ability to support their daughter. Ted was informed that he would have to pay 40,000 baht, or about $1,200, for this. Now, he first didn't question these costs. He believed that this was the standard procedure at this place. It is ingrained in the culture. To be honest, dowries do exist in Thai tradition, but their amounts can vary greatly and are occasionally purely symbolic. But Ted was new to all this. He wanted to do right by Tac and her family. He wanted to show he was serious and could take care of her, so he paid up without much hesitation. The thing is, these payments were just the beginning. As time went on, the financial demands kept coming. Tac needed money for this, money for that. It started to feel like a never-ending cycle. He found himself sending more and more money. But all of this was new to Ted. He wanted to treat Tac and her family with respect. He paid up without any hesitation, since he wanted to demonstrate that he was serious and capable of taking care of her. The problem is that these payments were only the start. The financial pressures continued to mount over time. Tac required funds for both this and that. It began to seem like an endless cycle. He noticed that he was sending more and more cash. In addition to agreeing to pay an additional 50,000 baht for Tac's schooling, he also began sending her 20,000 baht each month. Month after month, that comes to roughly $550. He initially explained everything away. "I'm investing in our future," he assured himself. "I'm assisting Tac in improving herself. And supporting your partner is perfectly acceptable, isn't it?" However, the expenses simply continued to mount. The issue was that genuine feelings were mixed in with all of this financial strain. He wanted to believe in their relationship because he cared about Tac. Therefore, he ignored any uncertainty that began to surface. But there's a limit to how long you can ignore that bad sensation. He began to question, Was this really normal? As he sent more money, did a healthy relationship look like this? The constant barrage of solicitations for money was something he couldn't help but notice. There was usually more than one explanation or cost. He was also straining his own money in the meantime. You know, it's a difficult issue. You want to do everything in your power for the person you are in love with. You want to think they're the best. However, when does assistance become anything else? He was beginning to feel less like a partner and more like an ATM. But now he was deeply in, both financially and emotionally. He had put a great deal of money and emotion into this connection. It was difficult to accept that it was all for nothing. He so persisted in providing money and holding out hope that things would improve. But he couldn't get rid of the persistent feeling in the back of his mind. There was a problem here. He could see all the warning signs in hindsight, but in the heat of the moment, when you're engrossed in what you believe to be love, it's not usually that obvious. You rationalize, you make excuses, and you wish for the best. Thus, believing he had established a strong basis for his romance with Tac, Ted returned to America. He had no idea, though, that the true test was only getting started. Financial shenanigans are a surefire way to ruin a long-distance relationship, which is already difficult enough. Initially, everything appeared to be fine. Tac would frequently write or call him to express how much she missed him, and how eager she was for them to be together once more. It was all promises and nice words. Then, as if on cue, the money requests began to come in. He had previously promised to provide Tac a monthly stipend. He believed that would be sufficient to pay for her schooling and basic necessities. Apparently, however, it wasn't. Every few weeks, Tac would have to deal with some new bill that she simply couldn't afford on her own. A specific massage course once cost an additional 20,000 baht. It'll help me get a better job, Tac stated. It was money for her sister's wedding another time. After that, it was for her mother's medical expenses. Although the causes were always shifting, the result remained constant. More funds being taken out of his account. He didn't give it much thought at first. In order to demonstrate his commitment to Tac and her family, he wanted to be encouraging. However, as time passed and the demands continued, he began to feel a little apprehensive. There was a discrepancy. In an attempt to determine whether the funds he was contributing for Tac's education were being used effectively, he would inquire about her academic performance. However, her responses were consistently evasive. She would say, "Oh, it's going well," or "I'm learning so much." However, she would shift the topic when he inquired about specifics, such as the classes she was enrolled in or her scores. Ted was in deep, but the warning signs were beginning to mount. He didn't want to think that something might be wrong because he had made such a significant financial and emotional investment. He continued to rationalize the misunderstanding by blaming it on cultural differences. However, the uncertainties continued to haunt him. He began to listen more intently to Tac's stories and became aware that they weren't always consistent. She would claim to be preoccupied with exams one day. She would then discuss a trip she took with a friend. It was simply nonsensical. There were other occasions when he tried to call her, but she would either pretend she couldn't talk because she was in class or that her phone was off. However, he would later notice her sharing content on social media from a beach. He was unable to ignore the growing number of discrepancies. He concluded that enough was enough. After months of exchanging money and receiving evasive responses, he had to witness what was truly happening for himself. Determining to find out the truth, he purchased a ticket to return to Thailand. He was experiencing a range of emotions as he packed his bags. There was a part of him that was thrilled to see Tak again, to hold her, to remember why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. But there was also the fear of what he would find. What if he was right about everything? What if the woman he believed to be his acquaintance was a phony? He made an effort to ignore these ideas and give Tak the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps everything had a rational explanation. Perhaps he was simply being suspicious, but he had a gut feeling that something wasn't quite right. He sensed it in his stomach. At last, he returned to Thailand, eager to see Tak and seek clarification. However, things didn't turn out quite as he had intended. He received a cold shoulder rather than a warm greeting. Something didn't feel right when he first saw Tak. She was no longer the vivacious, loving girl he had known. She appeared aloof, even irritated by his presence. It seemed as though their relationship had lost all of its warmth. At first, he tried to dismiss it. Perhaps she was simply worn out or under stress. As the days passed, however, it became evident that this was more than just a lousy mood. Tak was unique. She grumbled about everything. His clothes were too casual, the meal wasn't good, and the temperature was too hot. She didn't appear to like anything. Additionally, she either abruptly realized she had someplace else to be, or shifted the topic when he attempted to discuss their future together. The affectionate texts and video chats they had exchanged while his absence were a long cry from this. He was left wondering what had changed. Was this the real Tak, finally revealing her true self? Or was it something he had done? But now that she couldn't hide behind a phone screen, was she the real Tak, finally displaying her genuine self? The major surprise, though, was when he inquired about her academic background. Do you recall all of the funds he had been providing to support her education? As it happens, it wasn't even being used for education. Tak acknowledged that she had ceased going to school several months prior. He was hearing things he couldn't believe. Everything she had said about her classes, her classmates, and her tests had been false. What about the financial aspect? All of it was gone. Tak became defensive when he asked her questions. She said he tried to control her and didn't trust her. She refused to provide specifics, but stated that she would utilize the funds for other purposes. It seemed like speaking with someone quite different. He was reeling from the whole event. He was angry, felt deceived, and most of all, foolish. What caused his blindness? Because he wanted to believe in their love, he had disregarded all the warning flags. The really problematic element, though, is that he still wanted to make it work despite everything, including learning about the cheating and the falsehoods about school. It sounds insane, don't you think? However, love, or what we believe to be love, has the power to do that to a person. He had devoted a great deal of time, money, and himself to this relationship. It was nearly unbearable to consider leaving everything behind and acknowledging that it had all been in vain. As a result, he was caught up in this internal conflict. While a part of him yelled to abandon the situation and flee, another part of him was frantically looking for answers, for a way to save what they had. He attempted to discuss it with Tak in the hopes that they could resolve their differences. However, every discussion descended into conflict. He would become irritated, she would become defensive, and they would find themselves in the same predicament. It was like riding a roller coaster of emotions. He would move from being adamant about ending things to thinking back on the good times and persuading himself that they could make things better. However, it became more difficult to ignore the facts every day. There was no such thing as the Tac he'd been sending money to all this time. The one he'd fallen in love with. She was a fantasy, a meticulously constructed delusion meant to maintain revenue. Right in front of him was the genuine Tac, a stranger who appeared more concerned with his pocketbook than his feelings. It was an unpleasant experience. In front of him, all of his aspirations about establishing a family and a life with Tac were disintegrating. Even worse, he was unable to express his anger against her. He was too preoccupied with blaming himself for being duped. He couldn't force himself to leave, though, even when reality was staring him in the face. A small part of him still wished against all logic that everything could return to normal, that the Tac he had fallen in love with would materialize out of nowhere and everything would make sense once again. He wondered how long he could continue this before something had to give, so he stayed, caught between his doubts and his waning hopes, trying to make sense of the Tac he believed he knew, and the woman in front of him. Tac abruptly stopped talking, one evening following yet another dispute over trust and money. Her expression suggested that she was having difficulty with something. Unexpectedly, she suddenly exclaimed, "I need to tell you something." Aren't those phrases seldom good news? His stomach fell. Whatever lay ahead, he knew it would not be pleasant. He was absolutely correct. Tac admitted that she had been unfaithful to him for the 2 months he had been back in America. Yes, you heard correctly. She was off with another person while he was working extremely hard to send her money, believing that he was investing in their future together. Do you have any idea how that felt? Ted had given this relationship his all. Tac had been playing him like a fool the entire time he had sent thousands of dollars and created all these dreams for their future together. He was devastated. He felt as though someone had kicked him while he was on the ground after punching him in the stomach. The treachery, the hurt, and the wrath were all whirling like a tornado inside of him. "I was so angry and hurt at this point that words can't even explain," he stated to me. Who could blame him, really? This wasn't a simple miscommunication or small white lie. This was a complete betrayal of all he believed they shared. The really problematic element, though, is that he still wanted to make it work despite everything, including learning about the cheating and the falsehoods about school. That's what love, or what we believe to be love, can do to a person. I know, it seems ridiculous. He had devoted a great deal of time, money, and himself to this relationship. It was nearly unbearable to consider leaving everything behind and acknowledging that it had all been in vain. He so found himself attempting to make sense of it, to find a way to forgive Tac and go on. Tac would always wonder who she was speaking to when his phone buzzed. He would picture her going out with someone else every time. He couldn't force himself to leave, even though the doubt was eating him alive. And here's the thing, he even kept giving her financial support. Yes, you heard correctly, he continued to send money despite being aware of the infidelity and all the falsehoods. He seemed to believe that things will return to normal if he simply continued to show his affection and provide. Naturally, though, they didn't. How were they able to? The trust was gone, shattered like that mirror, and animosity began to develop in its stead. He became slightly angrier and more resentful each time Tac made another demand or sent him money. The relationship had devolved into something nasty and unstable. They would be at each other's necks one moment and trying to talk things out the next. It was like constantly having to tread carefully because you never knew what would cause the next explosion. The feeling that he was being duped, that no matter how much he gave, it would never be enough, and that Tac would always want more. More money, more freedom, more of everything grew throughout it all. Ted believed that Tac's relocation to America might provide them with the new beginning they required. New countries, new beginnings, you know the drill. The situation is going to grow even more difficult, so buckle up. Thus, they decide to relocate to America. It looked like it might actually work out at first. Ted hoped that this shift would strengthen their bond, and Tac was thrilled about the new surroundings. In an effort to help her acclimatize and possibly land a job in the future, he even assisted her in enrolling in some English classes. However, you are aware of the adage regarding hope. It is a risky situation. Before long, the fissures were once more visible. Tac's attitude began to change as she became more at ease in America. On paper, her increased independence sounds fantastic, but there were some unanticipated drawbacks. You see, Tac began resisting Ted more and more as a result of his newfound independence. Simple disagreements escalated into heated disputes. It seemed as though she was pushing things to their limits to see how far she could go. They would argue over money one day. Tac wanted more to send home or spend on shopping. It would be about her going out with friends he had never met the following time. Everything turned into a battlefield. And this is where the problem starts. Tac began to employ some quite deceptive strategies. If she didn't get what she wanted, she would threaten to leave. "If you don't give me money for this, maybe I should just go back to Thailand," she would remark. "Or if you loved me, you wouldn't question where I'm going all the time." Simply put, it was emotional blackmail. Ted, on the other hand, felt that he was losing control of the situation while attempting to maintain harmony. The disputes increased in frequency and intensity. Tac would occasionally ignore him for days at a time. At other times, the slightest things would cause her to blow up. It felt like he had to tread carefully in his own house. And here's what happened. Tac began griping about everything in America. The temperature was either too hot or too cold, the cuisine wasn't excellent enough, and the people weren't pleasant enough. She no longer seemed to be thrilled about anything. The enthusiastic woman who had initially arrived was a far cry from that. Tac only displayed affection when she requested something, he observed. Need cash for a new phone. All of a sudden, she was adorable. However, she was given the cold shoulder again as soon as she obtained what she desired. Living with a stranger who occasionally posed as his wife was like that. There was enough tension in the home for a knife to pierce it. Ted was always on edge since he had no idea what would start the next quarrel. After a long day at work, he would return home to find Tac prepared to argue about anything. He began to fear returning home as a result of it. What should have been a haven for him had become a battlefield. Furthermore, Tac appeared to relish the conflict, as if she were taking pleasure in seeing him struggle. How long can someone live like that, you have to ask? When something is so obviously wrong, how many times can you try to fix it? Ted had run out of energy, patience, and, to be honest, hope. Do you recall Tac's previous admission of cheating? Hold on to your hats, for she was going to reveal something else shocking. Thus, they were already living in America with their relationship in shaky shape. After another fight one evening, Tac abruptly stopped talking. Her expression suggested that she was struggling with something. Then she abruptly revealed that she had cheated once more. Yes, you heard correctly. Tak had gone and done it again after everything they had been through and after relocating to a completely different nation in an attempt to make things work. The worst part is that she didn't even appear to feel bad about it. Ted was in complete awe. He felt as though someone had kicked him while he was on the ground after punching him in the gut. All of the uncertainties and misgivings he had been attempting to suppress suddenly returned. How did she repay him when he gave her another chance? The worst thing, Tak pretended it didn't matter. Like she was informing him she had forgotten to buy milk, she dismissed it with a shrug. No apologies, no tears, just a harsh, unforgiving fact thrust into his face. Anger, hurt, and betrayal were all over him. He was feeling everything. He was shocked that this was occurring once more. What did he receive in exchange for all the sacrifices he had made, all the money he had provided, and everything he had done for her? You would think that this would be the last of it, that at last he would recognize Tak for who she truly was and turn away. Relationships, however, are complex. A part of him still wanted to make things work after this second betrayal. I realize it sounds ridiculous, but give it some thought. Unbelievably, they chose to attempt counseling. Yes, you heard correctly. In fact, they sought help from a therapist in an attempt to resolve their problems. But believe me when I say that it was a complete failure from the beginning. Tak was not at all serious about it. She would pretend that the entire situation was pointless. While she sat there rolling her eyes, she would simply shrug and claim there was nothing wrong with her when the therapist asked her to discuss her feelings. Additionally, don't bring up the topic of the cheating. Tak would become defensive and begin blaming Ted. Well, maybe I wouldn't have to look elsewhere if you paid more attention to me, she would reply. Do you think that's possible? In reality, she was attempting to hold him accountable for her infidelity. She seemed to be living in a completely separate reality, where there were no repercussions for her acts. He made every effort to ensure that the counseling was successful. He revealed his emotions and expressed how deceived and saddened he felt. However, it seemed like speaking to a brick wall. At last, it dawned on him that this relationship was irreparable. No matter how hard he tried and how much he wanted to make things better, it would never work. Tak was not and would never be the person he believed her to be. It was a painful pill to take. It had all been in vain, all those years, all that money, and all those hopes of a future together. He had been pursuing an imaginary Tak that only existed in his mind. Ted's temper eventually got the better of him. He realized it was time to terminate this terrible relationship after years of financial hardship and emotional ups and downs. Although it wasn't a simple choice, there are instances when you have to accept your losses and go on. Telling Tak it was done, he sat her down. No more opportunities, no more justifications. He was finished. Tak should have been outraged, wouldn't he? Not at all. She simply shrugged and inquired about the amount of money she would receive from the divorce. What a chilly reaction. There was a tremendous sense of relief on the one hand. Finally, the burden of ongoing disputes, mistrust, and financial strain was easing. He was able to breathe once more. However, there was also a persistent sense of regret. He didn't regret terminating things because he knew it was the right decision. Rather, he regretted all the time he had squandered, the money he had thrown away, and the warning signs he had disregarded. How could I have been so blind? He kept asking himself. Ted's tale is one that many can learn from. Remember the lessons and be careful in future. What do you think about Ted's story? Leave a comment below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more videos of stories from Thailand.